September 16th. My name is Felipe Fuentes. This is the Energy and Environment Committee. We are waiting for my colleagues to join the committee so that we can establish a quorum, but in the meantime, we'll go ahead and take general public comment so that we can wait for my colleagues to get here. There's only one speaker card for general public comment. Wayne.
Yes, that's good. Yes, for the record, thank you, Bob Blumenfield, for just showing up. Thank you, Councilman Koretz, for just showing up. Oh, thank you, Mitchell Farrell. It's good that we have a complete quorum. Oh, look at that. So we have the interesting things on the agenda. The LA Department of Water and Power may finally stop transferring money from our ratepayer budget to your general city fund. And I'm really looking forward to that. That's actually a lawsuit in Superior Court. That was taken up today in closed session, and I understand everybody had to get everybody out of there to talk in secret. However, pursuant to the Brown Act, we don't know what the action was that was taken by the City Council because Herb Wesson never bothered to tell us what action was taken by the council. Is the City of Los Angeles going to concede liability and tell the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power to not transfer any more money from its budget to your general fund? Well, if that were to happen, pigs would fly. So I guess what you did was that you hired special counsel, which will cost the taxpayers on this side money, and then DWP will hire special counsel to cost me as a ratepayer additional money. But in the end, I think we're getting closer to DWP being independent of the City Council.
Mr. Spindler, why don't you go ahead and give us your public comment on items number 1 and 2 and 3 while you're here. If we'll go ahead and, we didn't start your clock on the first one, so we'll go ahead and give them a total of 2.5 minutes there for the remaining 3 items. And for the rest of the public speakers, we will take your cards when we get to those items, but we'll let Mr. Spindler perform a little bit longer here. Mr. Spindler.
Mr. Chair, it doesn't, I'll have to let it count.
That's okay, I'll let you know when to cut them off.
Okay.
Yes, that's good. The Bureau of Sanitation, a preliminary plan for an equestrian staging area. Yes, that's what you need in the buffer lands, to have an equestrian staging area. Yes, horses. A city that's bankrupt, where the freeways are falling apart with the rainstorm, and we need a horse equestrian staging area. Well, of course, I mean, in a city that's bankrupt and just burning to the ground, I mean, you should have a place to ride horses, right? I mean, that's more important than the homeless. Then we have the Department of Water and Power on the existing viability of the power rate temperature zone. Yes, the temperature zones are a complete and utter ripoff to the city because the Valley knows that Valley homeowners use more water than the inner city and the colder climate areas. So now they want a third temperature zone in the hotter areas of the city. Okay, that's good, because the hottest areas of the city that should get 3 temperature zones are as follows: Encino, Woodland Hills, Reseda, Canoga Park, North Hills, Northridge. Those are the hottest areas of the city. Chatsworth, they don't need it. They got enough money over in Chatsworth. Then in number 3, again, the Department of Water and Power, the Workforce Development Department on the enterprise zone rate subsidy. Now this is good. This is a good thing because commercial ratepayers in CD1, in CD9 should be getting a discount and a tax credit on their rates because they get charged, thanks to this council, 80% more per kilowatt hour than residential ratepayers do for the same electricity under a phony formula. So you should be giving CD1 and CD9 commercial ratepayers a 50% cut in their rates as an enterprise empowerment zone rate subsidy.
Thank you, Mr. Spindler. That concludes.
I still have 20 seconds.
We started your clock late on the
No, I still had 20 seconds.
Thank you very much.
I just saw it. I can count.
Thank you very much.
I saw it there. Didn't I have 20 seconds?
Mr. Prieto, we'd like
Didn't I
to
have
call
20
item number
seconds?
1 to
But I see it.
for us.
Oh, and I have another 3 minutes. I appreciate that, yes.
No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't.
Yeah, that's right there. You're counting 256.
Thank you.
255.
Item number 1, Bureau of Sanitation report in response to motion Fuentes Huizar relative to the status of an equestrian staging area and recreational trails for Lopez Canyon bufferlands. We have staff from the Bureau. Okay. Yeah.
So I would also like to remind the members of the audience to not disrupt the meeting. We are going to be in a place now where we can hear. Mr. Prieto, if you can pull up the microphone there.
Certainly.
But we have to make sure that we maintain decorum for everybody alike. Thank you, Mr. Spindler, for shopping. All right, very good. Item number 1 before us, we'll have sanitation present, and then we will go ahead and hear from our speakers. Madam Clerk, I'd like to give our speakers 2 minutes apiece when it's time to hear their items.
Good afternoon, Mr.
Good
Chair,
afternoon.
Council members. My name is Khalil Garios, Division Manager, LA Sanitation. Before I start with my brief report and open it to any question you may have, I would like first to recognize some members of the community behind me and thank them for being here, this afternoon, middle of the afternoon. And I want to thank them for being with us every step of the way, working with us in the development of our phasing plan, and most of all, and most importantly, helping us to turn the landfill in what it is today. It's an environmental center. I want to thank you for also being here. Just as in response to the council motion, you have a report in front of you also. In 2010, LA Sanitation prepared a conceptual plan to convert the landfill into a community use facility and also a facility that could be utilized by LA Sanitation and the city. Phase 1 of the plan, which is the short-term plan, was to convert and upgrade the entrance of the site. We have a park that is being utilized by the community very often, to upgrade it, to change most of the tot lot equipment, and also to construct an environmental learning center. We completed both of these projects, and the Environmental Learning Center was presided by the chair back in April when we opened it, and it's being right now being utilized and very, very popular by the community. The attendance at our workshop has been increasing tremendously. We've had 8 community resident at the first opening. Now we're just averaging between 15 to 20 people. We provide their education on backyard composting, selection of drought-resistant plant, water conservation, and water harvesting. It's a partnership also with Department of Water and Power. We have staff from the Department of Water and Power who join us during the training session to also share with the community what they can provide as rebate for the community to utilize in order for them to conserve water and energy. Phase 2 of the development plan, which mainly what I'm going to just take a little more time on, is the development and construction of the equestrian center, what we call a trailhead. It's a location, if I may, share with you an aerial so you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Is the equestrian trailhead will be located in a buffer area that's owned by the city. It's a flat area located almost adjacent to the LA County buffer limit and with the city of Los Angeles. The area is about a little bit less than half an acre. The design of the equestrian trailhead is almost complete. It's still, maybe we can say about 90%. We've had several community meetings when we presented the design to the community. They've had a lot of comments, They shared some comment with us, and essentially also they've had told us that they have an expert that can help us improve the actual design of the trailhead. So far, we haven't heard yet from the expert, but we are happy to just, wait and see and hear from him before we complete the design. The design of trailhead is completed. The trail themselves have been selected as conceptual. We haven't yet done any design on the actual trails. There are some trails that are already existing that we can utilize, but some of the other trails that we felt would be an opportunity for us to construct are not yet designed and constructed. The only thing that we've completed is the trailhead itself. The estimate of the construction is around $500,000. At this time, the majority of that work could be done by our construction forces, with about maybe $200,000 of it need to be done by a private contractor that has an expertise of work that we don't have. This is where we at as far as the design of the trailhead, and we welcome any opportunity for any questions. Phase 3 of our development, we're not recommending to start that until the actual subsidence of the landfill, which is going to take another 15 to 20 years to be completed. And that is also only a proposal. That could be changed, from now until for 15 to 20 years from now. What we're recommending in phase 3 is the entire facility be converted into LA Sanitation city/public use facility. What I mean by that, it's a combination of uses that could be used for active and passive recreation, and also it could be used for community facilities, city facilities, like what you have in some recreational park facilities, that we could build certain building in areas that are undisturbed, and it could be utilized by both city staff, LA Sanitation staff, and the community. The second part of the motion asks us to report on how long it could take until the landfill complete its settlement. Landfill with trash decomposes, and we closed Lopez Canyon Landfill in 1996. Since 1996, and the latest topographic map that we have, so far we have between 20 and 25 feet of settlement that we have at the site. And we expect, based on the gas going to be generated for the next 15, 20 years, to have another 25 to 30 feet of settlement. So based on that, we feel that anything that we have to do as far as community use will be in the buffer area of the landfill. And if we have to use something within the landfill boundary, it should be controlled access. What I mean by controlled access, where that whoever from the community is using the site under controlled access, meaning trail or equestrian trail, would have split fencing where they can just go around the site and without just venturing off into the site that is actually in operation and maintenance. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Very good. I should note for the record, it was incorrectly reported by the public testimony prior to this that there was a full quorum. There is a quorum, but the members that are present are Mr. Blumenfield and Mr. O'Farrell. Thank you for being here. With that, colleagues, I'd like to do something a little bit different. If we could take the community cards, I know we typically take those at the end, but I'd like to invite our public testimony on this item so that it will inform the conversation as we talk to sanitation. So with that, I'd like to, Madam Clerk, give them each 2 minutes. Nancy Woodruff, Mike Trivich, Linda Hornick, and Catherine Paul, please. Those are the only 4 cards that I've got. Come on up. Are there any other cards on this item? Nope? Okay, very good. If you all could come on up, yeah, very good. It'll save a lot of time and we can have a good conversation this way. So that's Catherine Paul, Linda Hornick is making her way, Mike Trivich, and Nancy Woodruff. You each have 2 minutes to speak. Ms. Woodruff?
Hi, I'm Nancy Woodruff. I'm here from Foothill Trails District Neighborhood Council. And we have more comments from these stakeholders because they have spent a lot more time investigating this. My concerns at this point have to do with the comments I've received from community members in the last week because we just heard about this. Our concerns, number one, are the way it's set up in referencing funding for the equestrian trails, et cetera, might be tied into the solar project, question mark. The solar project really has not come to the community yet. We are hoping to hear something about that maybe in October. Our concerns at this point have to be with the feasibility report that refers to DWP saying that the solar would be under the FIT program. It seems to me that this would be much more applicable under the community solar, which is supposed to be community-based solar generation on city public lands rather than giving it to outside investors, Wall Street, et cetera, at the expense of all of us ratepayers. Anyway, thank you.
Very good. Whoever would like to go next? Linda?
Okay. Hi, I'm Linda Hornick, and I live near the Lopez Canyon Landfill, Canyon C. I feel like I'm experiencing deja vu with some of the remarks that Khalil made, but I do go back prior to 2007. I did attend the meetings. I do know of community use plans that are on the council file system that have been spoken about, written about, and are currently posted to the Sanitation website, meeting minutes which explain different phasing than what Mr. Garrios has just said is going to happen. And my concern is, we lived with the landfill. We were told certain things would come as a result of how we tolerated all of the trash and smells. And the environmental center is coming in ahead of schedule and smaller than originally proposed. The parks have not been upgraded with bathroom facilities and connections. There's a second park that disappeared from the plan. Basically, I'm seeing selective implementation and selective transparency. Because we do go to these meetings. I know I can't attend every one, but I do read the minutes, and a lot of them, not all of them, are on the website, and you can see for yourselves. There are things that were supposed to happen that just disappeared, and what's being proposed now is just whatever apparently we need to know after the fact. And the community under 071660, they developed a community use plan, but what I'm seeing here is it's being ignored in general, and it's being talked as being implemented, but it's changing with whatever the newest project is. There's an emphasis on commercial development. We had a trucking academy. There was a lawsuit. It stopped. You know, we have a gas generating facility. We had a leachate leak that we never got noticed of. So, I mean, we have things going on affecting the community still. More is proposed, but we're being told after the fact. So I am really concerned that this proposal with the solar link is even worse coming down the line, because that'll delay it, if not cause additional concerns we're not even aware about.
Thank you, Ms. Hornick.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Revich?
Yes, I'd like to speak specifically to item number 1, and the keywords are the buffer lands, project implementation and time frame. In 2008, on phase 1, was hiking trails. That's 7 years. There's been no progress on hiking trails and horse trails since then. It's not in the report here. Instead, we have solar panels. So I would like to see that there be a response to the issue of the hiking trails and they be implemented. There's no reason for that to be delayed for 7 years. Thank you.
Ms. Paul?
All right, the solar panel feasibility study, which hasn't had any community input as previously promised, it'll be presented October 1st to our community. It's totally separate from an equestrian trail, which has been promised for over 5 years. And the two projects are incompatible. The solar panel is the city's answer for mandates from the state, and meanwhile, the equestrian staging is to be, and the solar panel will be placed on landfill, while the trailhead and the staging and the hiking trails would be placed on buffer zones where there's no waste and they would not require an extensive environmental process. The Bureau of Sanitation, in its study, has suggested that money can be provided for solar panels, but at the same time, that's the way that we can get an equestrian staging area. Otherwise, there's no money for that. And I don't understand what kind of a tactic this is. Is this a way to serve a community that has already endured unmentionable odors and noise from both the landfill and now the green waste facility, as well as undue noise, unsightly views, and traffic throughout the years? I want to mention Phase 3 of the plan. It also talks about permanent structures, conference centers, sports facilities. This sort of thing, I don't think, was the idea of a hiking area. We already have a helipad, water tank, green waste mulching operation, and a gas recovery system. And I just can't help but doubt the Bureau's veracity when I envision an industrial neighbor instead of, which was once a garbage dump. So I'm hoping that we can reject tying the two situations together.
Very good. Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for coming to City Hall. With that, let's ask Mr. Garrios to come back on up here, and let's talk a little bit about the motion. Now, the motion that I drafted asked for a report on the equestrian trails and the amenities, in addition to asked about the sort of the settlement of the landfill, et cetera. And Mr. Garrios, you did speak to those, and I appreciate that. But I think it's difficult to untie the conversation that's been taking place, at least since I took office in July of 2013, about a potential for a solar project there. And you heard some of the public testimony here asking, I took some quick notes here, that it feels as if it's part and parcel, that you have to have a solar project in order to fund what's been promised, and I don't believe that to be true. Can you tell us the official position of the Bureau in terms of Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3? We still have a long time to talk about, but are those tied to any funding on any future solar development?
Councilmember, no. To answer your question, it's what we felt that could potentially will help with the funding. However, the funding could be realized and found just separately. It has no connection whatsoever between the feasibility study of the solar system and the equestrian trail.
Okay, that's very good to hear. A couple of things. There was also some comments about what's been promised for many years now, including hiking trails, a second park, basically insinuating that what we are looking at now, as proposed in your report, Phase 2 being a scaled-down version of what was promised. Help me understand and fill in the gaps. I had the benefit of being there from about 1999 through 2006 and then gone. What's happened in between there? It seems like those were the pivotal years from 2006 to 2013 that things have either disappeared or have not moved. Help me understand what in fact, from your official perspective, is happening at Lopez Canyon with respect to these plans.
Very good, Councilmember. I'm not aware of any other proposal that we presented to the community other what I shared with you this afternoon. The actual trail that you see here with the dot mark is what we presented to the community throughout the years. I can understand the frustration. Yes, I can understand the community frustration. We have not yet constructed any of the trail. The reasoning for that is we were concentrating our effort on the design of the trailhead first, and then the next step is from that trailhead, we can select all the other trails with the work with the community These are only proposal at this time. The one trail that we are concentrating on at this time is from the trailhead that we are going to, hopefully after your approval, start finishing the environmental study and then getting the permitting, and we can start the construction, is utilizing a natural trail that's right now is available for us, what we refer to as Bartolomew Canyon. And I'm sure, Councilmember, you walk that canyon yourself. And then take it up into the facility at Lopez Canyon, what we call B Canyon, and then just go where we hug the boundary of that canyon, and then it will be ending right on the top of the landfill. And then we are proposing also a part of the design to just connect it to what we call Rim in the Valley trail, and that's going to take a little bit more design and construction. This is exactly what we've been providing the community, and I can understand the frustration. It's been 7 years, but we haven't yet constructed them.
Very good. So everything that you laid out is largely what I've heard the community say that they're expecting. So I have to imagine a lot of misinformation takes place because so much time has lapsed.
Yeah.
So just to put a finer point on all of this, what's holding up the construction is the environmental aspect of it.
Yes.
Of the trailhead.
Yes.
Because presumably the trails, there really is little to no sort of environmental review. They're established, documented trails, and it's just a matter of connecting the dots. What is, for my benefit, your timeline for the environmental so that we can begin construction of this?
Right now, we have three things to do. That could be all done concurrently. To complete the design, like I said, is about 90%. There's going to be a little bit of more peer review, and just to, I want to recognize Bureau of Engineering also. They helped us with the design of the facility, and they're committed to complete the entire design. We're about 90%. We also have the permitting, and we feel that the permitting could be done very fast through building and safety, and also the environmental study. We feel that with mitigated negative declaration, we can just hopefully succeed with that particular, unless we get a lot of concern or complaint from the community. Just to share with you, Councilmember, through the whole process of the last 5 years, we haven't had, as we were presenting our conceptual plan to the community, we haven't had any concern or complaint from any of the residents that live close proximity to the location of the equestrian trail head. However, at the last meeting with the community, we had 3 community members that raised that concern. They raised some concern about the location, and we felt that at that time it behooved us to just go ahead and do the due diligence and prepare the environmental document. So what it takes for us is we need to hire a consultant under what we call a task order solicitation, and that hopefully could take between months to 3 months to get that. And I think the actual study would take about 3 to 4 months. I would say maybe about 6 to 7 months before we complete the environmental documentation.
So presumably by spring of next year, barring any sort of problems with the environmental and the review and all of that, you think that we would have likely landed with a mitigated negative declaration and could be speaking to construction?
Absolutely.
Okay. And so in terms of funding for the construction of the project, what needs to be done in order to make sure that the money is ready at the conclusion of the environmental process? Okay.
Like I said, we have an exceptional sanitation construction crew. We've done several green street projects, and I feel very confident that the majority of the work could be done in-house by our construction crew.
And about 200,000 would have to be out of house. So what do we need to do to secure the funding? I have no doubt that once you all start, you'll get it done, but what do I have to do to make sure that you have the funding necessary to proceed? Is there anything that I need to do?
Well, if you can help us, Councilman, with the Community Amenity Fund, if you can just help us maybe identify that portion of the funds that need to be done by a private contractor to just supplement the work that's be done by actual city forces.
Okay. I'll tell you what I tell the community as it relates to the community amenity fund so that we're on the record. I absolutely am agnostic to the source of dollars. My job is to find them for you. So I will figure out how to help you find the money. So whether it's that or some other pot of funds, we will do that, because that's what I enjoy, is the flexibility, because otherwise we're lagging behind on projects, which begs, I typically don't ask this, but because the community has asked repeatedly, what's taken so long for us to get going here? I know what I read in the newspapers, that there was an academy up there, it failed, there was a lawsuit, but why is it that we're here today talking about something that was promised many years ago?
Well, council member, being the division manager myself, the buck stopped right here. We've had several other projects that we had take a little more priority. I mean, I can understand the frustration, and this particular project took the back seat because of all the other projects that we had to get, finished and done. And also the funding issue. We didn't have the expertise at that time from our staff to do that certain construction. They learned that as they start taking on small Green Street projects, small landscape projects, like the Lopez Canyon Environmental Education Center. That's done by our staff. So as they start learning, we felt that we can handle the majority of the construction. So by then, we felt that, okay, now we can just put it back and then put it on a fast track to get it constructed.
Very good. And colleagues, by the way, I appreciate your patience. I know this sounds very much like a Council District 7 project, and in some ways it is, but it has got the opportunity to be a very regional opportunity for the equestrian community across the entire city of Los Angeles. So thank you for your patience. So I think I understand the funding, and let me take the responsibility there. It's my job to help you find the remaining dollars.
Thank you.
And barring any problems with the environmental review and the circulation of said document, we can be starting in the first quarter of next year. Notwithstanding all of that good news, what are the next pieces of community outreach that you will be performing, so that, separate and aside from the 5 great people that are here, that the community understands the timeline and what's going to happen, so that you can receive input as well? Maybe there's a latest, greatest technique that we can use in putting these trails together. What's the community outreach going to look like between now and next year?
We do have a community meeting that we hold, minimum of 2 every year, and we have one scheduled for October 1st. And then we can share with the community, and we usually, for critical items, when we have an agenda, like the report on the equestrian trailhead, and also we are going to present the feasibility study result by our consultant. There's going to be an opportunity for a lot of community members to be attending. So we'll share with them on October 1st. Hopefully your decision this afternoon, and then what our plan is from now until the spring of next year, and what are the steps we're going to be taking. And then we can just work with them at every meeting and let them know through also email, because the majority of the community members, we have email that we share communication with and correspondence, and then they share it also with their community. And we also we committed to just go to their meetings also and share with them what the process of where we at and what milestone we have achieved. Okay. So we'll do that too.
Very good. Colleagues, any questions for the Bureau of Sanitation?
No. I have a quick one.
Sure.
Thank you.
Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for my own understanding, so someday when all the land settles, you'll have 450 acres possibly for full use of a park.
400 acres. Correct?
So that's about 80% the size of a Legion Park, which is an enormous regional park possibility in the future. So first of all, really good stuff on Rim of the Valley, because that connects all the way to the urban core eventually.
Right.
And I've done some work on that as well in my own district. And then my questions are in terms of operations and maintenance. So at some point, is this going to be some sort of shared responsibility between sanitation and recreation and parks? Do we know yet? Will it become a recreation and parks facility? will there be revenues generated from uses such as parking, or maybe, could you address that future plan?
Councilmember, at this time, we have not approached Department of Recreation and Park on any of this. And we do feel comfortable because of the size of the equestrian trailhead that will have, and then the closeness to the landfill itself, that we'll be able to maintain it ourselves.
Through monies generated from the solar uses, for example?
Again,
or other possibilities as yet unidentified?
Well, again, it has I just want to make clear that I don't want to make the connection now with the solar project to the equestrian trailhead. The actual maintenance of the trailhead is not that much for us to just take a lot of work out of our workforce that we have right now. With essentially just go there and make sure that the trash cans are taken care of, and then some of the landscaping, and to make sure all the water is there, the trough for the horses. So we'll be able ourselves to take care of it and maintain it so far. If we need any help to expand our workforce, then we can just hopefully maybe request it in the budget. But at this time, we don't feel that we need it.
Thank you.
Mr. O'Farrell, that's an excellent question. I want to thank Mr. Blumenfield now. He helped me identify the Los Angeles Conservation Corps as a partner, and so they just the city just finalized a lease with them to move into the Sunland Tujunga City Hall. And LACC happens to be a contractor of sanitations, as well as somebody that the city of Los Angeles partners with. So my long-term vision is to make sure that the Conservation Corps is also assisting with trail maintenance and that sort of thing, and training, so that we get a couple of birds with the one stone here. We get the upkeep, we get the training, we're helping at-risk youth, and, thank you, Mr. Blumenfield, they're located now in the northeast San Fernando Valley at the Sunland Tujunga neighborhood City Hall. So very good. I want to be clear, it's not part of the motion. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to speak to the solar aspect of this at this point because it's not agendized, but we have a lot of conversations to do. I'm glad that one of the speakers made the distinction between a feed and tariff program and community solar. To me, one is better than the other, but it's not to say that I'm signed off on either one of them. So let us move expeditiously on this, colleagues. If there isn't any additional questions on this, I'd like to note and file the report and instruct the Bureau of Sanitation in collaboration with the Bureau of Engineering, Recreation and Parks, and what other relevant departments are necessary to do the following. 1, to finalize the design plans for the recreational trails and access points at the Lopez Canyon Bufferlands with input from the community and Council District 7. 2, identify the funding needed for the project and additional sources for funding other than the amenities fund, so be creative, and report back to the council with the results of the final design plans and your outreach with the community so that we can get this thing going.
Okay, excellent.
Understood? Very good. Colleagues, hearing and seeing no objection, that will be the order on item number 1. Thank you very much. That brings us, Mr. Prieto, to item number 2.
Certainly, item number 2. Motion, Blumenfield, Labange, relative to Department of Water and Power reporting on the viability of the existing power rate temperature zone and whether the zone should be adjusted to account for existing climate variations. You have Neil Guglielmo from Department of Water and Power and George Chen.
If I could also invite the ratepayer advocate, I know that you've got an opinion on this as well. And colleagues, for the record, there are no speaker cards on item 2 or item 3, so we may be home free here.
So,
All right, good afternoon, council members. Neil Guglielmo with the Department of Water and Power. I'm joined by George Chen from Water and Power. He's our rates expert. And of course, we have Dr. Pickle. You want to introduce yourself as well?
Fred Pickle, Executive Director, Office of Public Accountability, Ratepayer Advocate, and
Camden Collins, Deputy Executive Director, working for Fred.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having us today. So we're here to provide a brief presentation in response to a council motion, essentially an update on where we're at. The council motion, if I could, the moving language is that the Department of Water and Power be requested to report in 30 days on the viability of the existing power rate temperature zone map and determine if the zones should be adjusted, updated to account for existing climate variations, including the formation of a third temperature zone for customers who live in hotter areas of the city. So let's get started with our presentation. What you can see on the far right is our existing temperature zone map, zones 1, which is our cooler temperature zones in the city of Los Angeles, although we've had some hot days recently, so even the cool areas have seemed pretty warm. That's the kind of yellow shaded, and then the orangish, reddish shaded area is our zone 2, our hotter areas. These were set back in 2008. A lot of the information from the two temperature zones was derived from the CEC, state, California Energy Commission. As you can see here, we have our structure, we have our temperature zones 1 and 2. Tier 1, that allotment is that first 350 kWh, kilowatt hours per hour, and zone 2 being that up to 500, the first 500 kWh. Tier 2 then for zone 1 is 700. Tier 3 for zone 1 is greater than the 1050. Zone 2, tier 2 is 1,000, and then for tier 3 it's greater than 1,500. So in terms of our climatic regions, we also have some information on the next slide. It kind of shows you some information based on appliance usage and how it varies based on the temperature zone that our customers are within. So as you can see from this slide, there's a substantial difference on the energy side from a refrigerator operating in the cooler zone, zone 1, versus zone 2. That's the largest, I think, differential that we see. You can also see there the fan, which is kind of 3/4 of the way across the page, orange, or not orange, I'm sorry, purple shaded. If I'm a little colorblind, I do apologize. Purple shaded column, I think is what it is. That's at roughly 80. So really it's that fan and the refrigerators show the marked difference between zone 1 and zone 2.
Neil, I got a question for you.
Yes.
What does air conditioning look like? Probably not so big of a deal in zone 1, but just give me a number, sort of, what does that look like?
We at the time we didn't study the air conditioning because the location driven, and if a body requires air conditioning, so we think the fan will do the difference for the two different zones.
The attic fan?
Yes.
Not a whole house fan like I've got at home?
No. It just so that's how CEC approach their justification on their. We look at their website and try to study how they divide the zones in IOU's territory, and based on that, we use that as our base to formulate the zones.
I think it'd be helpful to understand what an air conditioning unit does because I mean.
Absolutely, and I don't understand the logic. The answer you just gave, I didn't follow it. Just as a follow-up, because like Felipe, that was the thing that jumped out at me as well. I would think the huge differential would be in the air conditioning, and it's not even on the board.
Yeah.
Why is it not even on the board?
When we have the zones, I think the air conditioning is kind of more luxury, appliance at the time.
I'm sorry, it's more what?
More.
It's considered more of a luxury at the time. It was studied back in 2008 by the CEC.
Right.
So what they looked at was a differential of a fan to make up that difference between someone in a cool zone and a hot zone.
So to accept that premise that you don't have air conditioning in there, the premise is that air conditioning is a luxury and not a necessity.
If I might try and clarify, the CEC is looking at baseline. And so this is, air conditioning is not on it because it's not in the baseline. The DWP has put the word typical up there. So they're not actually speaking the same language, but they're trying to go through the same exercise. So that's why you're not seeing air conditioning in the baseline numbers for each zone.
Right, but the baseline is typically what you need to survive.
Not in summer.
Well, right.
That's not in baseline.
But just to be clear, that's the California Energy commission's determination of what a baseline looks like.
Yeah, and they've had this issue with the foothills in the Central Valley and trying to get that recalibrated for global warming and looking at the temperature degree days in all of the zones. Exactly. But baseline is not your peak summer conditions when people are running their air condition. It's the rest of the time. So that's why you're not seeing air conditioning on the slide.
But there's nothing that prevents us from making the same mistake that CEC did. I mean, in fact, we should try not to make that mistake and ignore it.
Exactly.
And we should be looking at that. But we'll get to that. But thank you for raising that, and sorry to jump in on the follow-up.
No, it jumps out.
It does. Yeah.
Okay. So this next slide is based on 2006-2007 data published in 2008, which showed by the tiers 1, 2, and 3, and by the temperature zones, cooler temperature zone, hotter temperature zone, the number of customers. So as you can see there, what you had was a makeup of roughly 57% or so. Tier 1 was the low, 50% was the high, all the way if you look at Tier 3, 4.8% on the low, 5% on the high. Now, as we compare that to more recent data, this is based on our 14-15 fiscal year, what you'll see there is the customers, still you'll see roughly 55, 56% or so on the Tier 1 low and high. But that Tier 3 increases more actually in the low area than it does in the high, 7.3%, 5.9%. And then we've added to that consumption data that we have from 14-15. And what you can see there is that consumption is also higher in that Tier 2 and Tier 3 in the low temperature zone as opposed to the high temperature zone.
I'm just going to interrupt you again. I'm sorry. So that tells you an awful lot.
Mm-hmm.
But when you define consumption, is that by the CEC standards?
No.
No, it's the actual usage.
That's real consumption.
Yes.
So the AC, everything.
Everything's all included.
Is included there.
Yes.
Okay. I think that's important for us to recognize. So again, that's everything. So in Tier 3, in the high 5.9%, that's by zone, right? That's still the same color?
Correct. The red is the hot zone. The blue is the lower temperature zone.
So it's still lower than
Yes.
the cool zone?
The low is basically has higher consumption, higher number of customers in Tier 3. So just basically in summary, where we've been, where we're at as we proceed forward, is that focus again on energy conservation, providing incentives for our customers if they want to do distributed generation such as solar for their homes, allowing for the energy efficiency measures of which we have many, and then offering those low usage customers those lower rates as well. In the temperature zones, you can see Zone 1, 2008, 4.8%. In Tier 3, now based on the 14-15 data, 7.3%. Zone 2, 5%, now 5.9%. So roughly very similar, just a larger increase in the that Zone 1, that lower temperature zone, in that Tier 3. And then in conclusion, those marginal customer increase for Tier 3 for both zones over the 7-year period. We're looking again at 2006-7 to comparison to 2014-15. Tier 3 customers still below 10% of our total customer population. And of course, we're going to recommend that anybody who's moving into that Tier 3 or is already in that Tier 3, we're going to encourage them to install energy efficiency as much as they can within their homes, LED conversions and such.
Just follow up on these graphs. How are you controlling for the adoption of solar in the valley?
You want to talk?
Are folks who have solar still in these graphs?
So the information here is our total customers. So everyone that's a customer participating with our department, whether a solar customer or not a solar customer, are presented here in terms of the number of customers and the consumption.
And the solar rate in the valley is much higher at this point, right? Adoption.
The number of customers in the valley that are using solar?
Right.
Yeah, I don't have that either.
We don't have exact, but I can show you the number.
But just statistically speaking, so every time someone goes onto solar, they're still a customer. So they may normally have been a Tier 3 user.
Right.
They then come off of the, they become a Tier 1 user because they have solar.
Likely a tier 2. We try and encourage those.
Tier 1 or tier 2, you're trying to get,
Right.
mass balance when you're a solar customer.
Right. We want them to load
So
fall.
your tiers are going down. So I guess what I'm getting at is that this is very skewed, or unless you in your data control for the solar use, you're not actually seeing the real picture of what's going on statistically.
What's the number of solar?
I think part of the rate design is we like to encourage people go on the solar distributed, generation. And if, like you said, because this influenced by the solar, adoption and help the value reduce the tier 3 customer, which really achieve our goal. And we want to continue on the same path that provide a price signal so that people will say, okay,
But you're talking policy. I'm just talking math right now.
Yes.
Because I get the policy and
Okay.
I'm all for the solar policy, but
Okay.
statistically, mathematically, when I look at this diagram,
Right.
I'm seeing something that is skewed because of the adoption of solar. And so what I would contend is if you actually controlled for solar, these red lines would be much higher than the blue lines in actuality.
We'll pull the figures for you. Our
Right.
number of solar customers as a total percentage of our population is still rather small. We'll be happy to show you what the solar customers are in the Zone 1 versus Zone 2.
Right. And we have about 5,000 solar customers, and we have about 1.2, 1.3 million total residential customers. So the percentage, like you mentioned here,
We
is
can get that.
small.
We can get
Yes.
those figures.
But those are also precisely the same customers who are most incentivized to go solar in the valley are your tier 3 high-using customers. So, my concern is, so you take them off the block, even though they're a small percentage, they're the highest users, that then equalizes the bars a little bit. But what it really does is it puts an extraordinary burden on the folks who live in the hot zones who don't have solar. But anyway, go ahead with your...
No, that's
with
our,
presentation.
essentially, we've concluded the presentation. I mean, these are the points that we have. We have the study from 2008. We have the update that was done in 14-15. We have the rate proposal that has been submitted in draft form. We're planning to go back to our board on the rates, hopefully in December as well. So, but we're not, at this point, we don't have a proposed change in the temperature zones for either power or for water.
Mr. Blumenthal, before I ask some questions, maybe we could hear from Dr. Pickle.
Okay, sure. Dr. Pickle?
First, this is the perfect time to have a rate structure discussion, especially while we're reviewing the rates and the rate structures. We see that DWP should report back on several factual issues and update this information, including a validation of the temperature question that you've raised in the motion. Has the recent record, temperature record, does it show that it's hotter in terms of cooling degree days in the valley or not? The second is, are there any updates to the CEC information? And third, if we can nail down specifics on solar in the valley versus not. Tammy, any additions?
No, I just think that the calibration of the rate that's going to shave off that tier 3 is something we're looking at very closely with their rate design. They proposed a really interesting and creatively different rate structure for residential to deal with those issues, but definitely in the next 5 years, we're going to see price signals drive people out of those tiers into either energy efficiency or just, straight reductions from changing their usage behavior or solar. All three things are likely to happen with what they're proposing.
Well, certainly, a few questions, but certainly the items that you mentioned as far as what should be reported on, I want to include in our motion as we move forward. I mean, the reason I'm putting this motion forward is I'm very concerned about the extreme heat in the valley, vulnerable constituents dealing with that heat. You mentioned when we were talking about the graphs that air conditioning was considered somehow a luxury by CEC and not included in the graph, which everything we know now, it's just not the case. I mean, it's about a healthy lifestyle. It's about, in many cases, life and death when you're dealing with senior citizens and vulnerable populations like, our youth. So, because of heat stroke and exhaustion and all of the things that we're seeing with extreme heat. So I definitely want to see these, graphs come back with air conditioning reflected as well, because I think that's a huge driver for the need for a Tier 3. The refrigerator argument is great to some extent, but really that's just a proxy for air conditioning, because why is one refrigerator higher than the other? It's because it's working harder in a hotter climate. So if that's the delta in a refrigerator, then the delta for air conditioning is going to be even more extreme. And then what we're talking about in terms of the impact on these numbers when it comes to the solar percentage, I'd like to see that spelled out a little bit as well, because I'm just convinced looking at these numbers that it's been skewed by the fact that people have been self-correcting, which is great, and it's a good incentive, as you say, for the policy incentive to get people to go on to solar. But what it means is that those folks who are left behind in the hot climates are ending up shouldering a disproportionate burden even more. And as we know, the variance between the valley and other hot areas can be 15, 20 degrees sometimes. It's huge, and it was reflected back, when the CEC did its study, they haven't, or the PUC did their study, they haven't done a study, an update since then, right, since this was based on?
Correct.
And that's
We'll double check, but the last study that was done was...
Right, they have not changed.
Right. But I don't think that should be a reason for us not to move forward. In fact, I know DWP considered this a couple of years ago, right? DWP, I read an article about DWP looking at these rate changes, but hasn't moved forward on it yet. And that was an LA Times article, I think, in 2007. It talks about Los Angeles Department of Water and Power assembled a plan to charge many households in the San Fernando Valley lower rates for electricity during the summer compared with the rest of the city. That never happened, right? Do you know what happened to that?
2008. This was the result.
This is the result.
This is the result of that. Before that, we didn't have differentiation between zones. So the 2007 to 2008 implementation created the two zones.
So that happened then with the two zones.
Mm-hmm.
It's now 7 years later, and we're, times have changed. It's gotten hotter. CPUC hasn't updated their map, and the question is, in asking for a written report about whether it's justified to change that, to look at that zone change now, 7 years later. Also, the ratepayer advocate reporting, bringing that back before committee next time as well, as we were discussing. So for me, this is a big issue in terms of folks in the hot zones. It's not a question of how much you pay for your rate. It's a question of what is considered the basic amount of energy that you need to maintain, as you said, not a luxury, but basic Tier 1 life. We've already accepted the premise about having two zones, and now the question is, what is the actual, in today's day and age, is there a differential for the hottest areas and creating a third tier?
If I may, obviously the health and well-being of our customers is very important to us as well. What I would add is that as part of the rate outreach process, we've been going to all areas of the city to make these rates presentations. And the feedback we're getting from others in Zone 1 also is, well, yes, it's hotter in the valley, but it's hotter in our areas as well. So when we look at this, we'll look at that update because, again, we're looking at relative to the entire city. We're serving both Zone 1, Zone 2 customers. The Zone 1 customers, and the contention is that why is the valley being treated differently? We're hot here too. So we should have a higher allocation. So it's not, we fully respect where you're coming from and your constituents where they're at in the valley. But I do hear that from folks in mid-city area, not so in the San Pedro area where I come from per se, but I've heard some on the west side, Boyle Heights. We've been taking this information back and processing it as part of the outreach process. So your concerns are well expressed. We'll be happy to come back to you with the information on the solar, on the AC. We'll see if there are any updates from the CEC. We'll contact the staff directly on that as well. So
it's, even in this existing data, it's useful to note that the percentage of Tier 3 customers in the cooler zones grew by 50%. between these two time periods. So that may mean the greater penetration of AC in the cooler zones,
Is the increase in tier 2.
for the cooler zone.
Which is useful to look at, but I think the fundamental question is, what is the basic tier 1 that we want for all of our Angelinos to have in terms of, life? What is health and safety? And health and safety means having a certain amount of air conditioning when you're in a hot zone, having a refrigerator, these kinds of things. And so maybe it's a zone for tier 1, but maybe something different for tier 3.
Just to clarify a little bit, we could give everyone in Tier 1 an extra 100, 200, 300 kilowatt hours in Tier 1, but everyone's Tier 1 rate will be higher as a consequence because the revenue is still going to be collected from the class. And so it's kind of like having two balloons connected by a straw, because we're not going to actually put any of the revenue on other classes to make up for changes in tiers. So generally speaking, LA has the shallowest tier structure of the large utilities in California, and this rate case is their opportunity to evaluate and explain to the public why we should have more of a price differential between tiers, because we've been very flat in technical terms with not as much difference. So then you're talking about just making for bigger allocations in summer and looking at that and tying it to degree days.
Or an additional tier.
But the industry standard right now, I always going back. They used to have 4 or 5 tiers, and they're going toward the 2 tiers, even just 1 tier approach. So, the standard is going to change somewhat the trend.
We'll be happy to report back. We'll gather the information, report back to you.
Mr. O'Farrell? Thank you. Just a few quick questions. I look forward to getting the information as well, because even though there are about 5,000 solar customers compared to over 1 million of everyone else, I think those percentages will be very telling, very informative. And who knows how that'll inform us, so I think it'll be useful. So thank you, and thank you for this endeavor, Bob. I think it's great. Question about residential, in terms of the 2 zones, are these the same zones for residential and business or industrial customers? It's all, there's no zone differentiation?
No zone for commercial customers, there's no zone for them.
There's no zone at all?
Yes. Only the zone is allotment, the tier 1 allotment, the tier 2 allotment.
Okay.
So the tier rates for the residential customer, any commercial customer, they are on a time of use rate or just straight rate. So there's no zone involved.
Because one of the consequences of this this arrangement from 2007, or was it 2008, was that our entertainment industry was hit really hard with 30, sometimes 40% increase in their energy rates, which caused some of them to start building studios out of the state. I mean, it literally, I spoke with a number of them at the time. I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity to take a look at that in this mix. And maybe I'm going outside of the proverbial box and asking that question, but I think it's something that's worth taking a look at. And in terms of the third temperature zone, the zones are interesting to me as far as the possibility, because I live in Glassell Park, and it looks like most of the 13th is actually in zone 2, which is considered a hot zone, but I think there's a vast difference between the side of the hill that the 13th district, for the most part, is on and, the North Valley. I would argue that where I live, it's probably 15 degrees cooler in the summer than it is in Pacoima. And also, I think we're looking at just all the heat, but it flips in the winter. So I think there's probably more heaters going in the valley than in the basin. So that hasn't been talked about too much, but as a layman looking at this, what can you say about that, the energy consumption during the winter, if it's flipped?
Natural gas.
Yeah.
Or if it's consistent?
Pretty much, we look at the heater, they're using gas. So it's not electricity. So we don't see much different. In the wintertime, we look at both regions almost equivalent. There's not much difference, the household use consumption.
Oh, there isn't. Okay.
Right. It's mainly because so many of them are using natural gas for their heaters as opposed to energy. For those that would be using an energy-based heating system, then we would anticipate their costs would be higher. They'd be using more energy in the winter, like you said, for heating.
Right.
So we do see a lot of natural
gas versus electricity. That makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
There is a bump in fan use from heating
True.
that shows up on the electric side.
Okay, yeah, the space heaters, the electric space heaters.
And forced air.
And forced air. Okay. Which are also less safe in general. It's another issue. But anyway, okay, well, thank you. This helps.
Okay, very good. So let's go ahead and have the department collect the comments that you heard and questions from my colleagues here and come back with a formal written response to the motion in 60 days.
And if we could have the ratepayer advocate review that report.
Sure, in collaboration with the department.
We'll be happy to work through it.
Very good. That shall be the order. There are no public comment cards on item number 2. Item number 3.
Item number 3, motion Fuentes Blumenfield relative to the Department of Water and Power in conjunction with the Economic Workforce Development Department to report on the status of Enterprise Empowerment Zone Rate Subsidy Program and its impact on economic development and job creation. You have representatives from both departments.
Very
One.
good.
She's coming back.
Yeah, Ms.
Ms. Perry's coming.
Perry should be back in a second here. So let's go ahead and at some point make room for her. And Brian, did you want to be up here for this, or? All right, that's fine. Very good. Stay back there. All right, very good. All right, very good. Colleagues, let's go ahead and hear a presentation. Just to give you all an idea, I thought that there could be a way for us to further incentivize additional economic activity in the city of Los Angeles. Thank you, Mr. Blumenfield, for being the second on the motion. And the idea is, can we, within the envelope of what is legally justifiable and recoverable in rates, could we create a tier that was legal that would incentivize additional economic activity, i.e. More consumption? And my thinking, truthfully, colleagues, came as a result of my continuing education on energy. We know that as we progress to a more renewable portfolio, you have more energy generated during peak hours when you're looking at solar. And so we are beginning to realize that there is an opportunity to utilize more energy during those peak times. And the secret sauce here is, at some point, if we're able to store that energy, we will be able to justifiably, from a rate-based perspective, ask for this energy, instead of being curtailed, to be utilized in a different way, and hopefully in a way that further stimulates the economy in Los Angeles. So that was the idea behind this motion, and I'm very curious to hear from staff what it is that y'all found out.
Thank you very much. Neil Guglielmo again with LA Water and Power. We have a presentation for you this afternoon, and we'll start off with a little bit of history. And of course, I'm joined by Jan Perry, General Manager of Economic Development Department. She could probably help us out a little bit with some of that history on the State Enterprise Zone Program. But essentially, there were a number of benefits in place under the State Enterprise Program, tax credits, employee training benefits. Local government was allowed to add on in terms of additional benefits. There was technical assistance provided by our department. There was a discounted rate program in place as well, which was a discount over a 5-year period. However, more recently, what we saw was that in July of 2013, the law that was signed into effect ended that program. And then effective January 1st, 2014, unfortunately, Department of Water and Power is no longer able to provide those discounts for those newly eligible customers. But did you want to talk a little about perhaps about the previous program that was in place?
If you want me to.
If you want some additional context.
I mean, it's over with, so.
It'd be helpful.
Okay, great. So for those of you who don't know the program, the California Enterprise Zone Program, it was established in 1984, and as was mentioned just now, ended in July 2013. The city had 3 very active enterprise zones: Hollywood, East LA, that's 1, Harbor Gateway, actually that was 3, Hollywood, East LA, and Harbor Gateway, and it covered a very huge swath of the city, and they were focused on stimulating business expansion and job creation by reducing business costs and providing incentives for lending and for hiring highly disadvantaged workers. This was achieved by a number of things: hiring and sales tax credits, preferences for state contracts, upfront expensing of depreciable property, 100% net operating loss carried forward for up to 15 years to reduce tax liability, net interest deduction for lenders on loans to businesses in the enterprise zones, and utility rate discounts, which is why we're both at the table together, and other locally packaged incentives. The local incentives were unique in Los Angeles because we're so focused on development. They were things like reduced parking requirements, site plan fee waivers for projects of over 40,000 square feet or more, and then a sewer facility hookup charge program allowed fees to be paid for in installments and electrical rate discounts. The electrical rate discount offered by the department provided a 5-year discount beginning at 35% and declined 5% each year over the course of 5 years. Anecdotally, and I don't have any metrics on it, but it was considered to be an extremely attractive incentive to new businesses that were considering locating in enterprise zones. So that's something that was mentioned very, very often. Our city response to the unwinding of the local enterprise zones was to continue to provide local incentive packages in the 3 enterprise zones, and at the time in 2013, the city council funded EWDD business zone managers and a voucher unit for at least 1 more year with enterprise zone voucher funds. Those actions also included directing the Department of Water and Power to continue its electrical rate discount. So the local incentives have continued, but the Board of Department of Water and Power has not voted to continue its easy rate discount program. And then, there's another series of recommendations, which I guess I can go through. Came out through the CLA-CAO, I think back in 2013, to look at discounting water rates, reduced or waiving planning fees, building and safety inspection fees, waiving gross receipts tax or incentives for early payment of city sales tax, and amending the local bid preference to give an additional 2% to businesses based in the city of Los Angeles on top of the existing 8% preference given to businesses in the city of Los Angeles. The city has not adopted any of these additional proposed incentives, and EWDD's enterprise zone managers and tax credit voucher unit has been dissolved due to a lack of continued resources. So the impacts of these former enterprise programs, we focused more on States Go Biz, which spun off the enterprise zone program into a statewide business incentive program. And they have a number of tax incentives, but they are very limited and they're very competitive. And then in the past couple of years, many Los Angeles businesses have received tax breaks through a state program called California Competes. The incentive amounts are reduced statewide. Businesses with existing tax credits approved prior to the dissolution of our voucher program in December 2014 are allowed to take these credits over a 5-year period. So we have not yet seen the full impact of the loss of these state incentives. In 2014, which was our last year of processing hiring tax credit vouchers, we did process, just to give you a snapshot, applications for over 40,000 employees in 4,679 businesses located in Los Angeles, estimating the hiring credit provided to be millions of dollars in tax savings. The electrical rate subsidies provided by DWP targeted new businesses and high wattage users. And we believe, again, I don't have metrics on it because they weren't measuring those at the time, but anecdotally, again, that DWP saw immediate and long-term increased revenue. It seemed to be a win-win program, and I'm going to take a stab and guess that that's been assumed in their long-range operating projections. And so for that reason, we would be very interested in seeing whether DWP decides to continue an incentive like this, whether it's citywide or focusing on enterprise zones. Either way, it's a good situation. So that's basically it.
So a quick question. So I know that probably partly responsible serving in the legislature for the enterprise. I don't remember when that vote was, but I understand that they're gone, and Pacoima has had an enterprise zone. But the local incentives that the city of Los Angeles could add on, were those dissolved immediately after the state did away with their enterprise program? And what prohibits us from, your department, from supplying those same incentives?
Nothing prohibits us from supplying those local incentives other than the funding for the positions to make sure that we have the staffing and to cover our admin costs, so that, we're a grant-funded department, by and large, probably more rather than less, close to 90%. And so we always have to be very mindful that our administrative costs are funded, and that includes salaries.
Got it.
Yeah.
And so as it relates to the discounted, I'm using the words that you all use, discounted rates, how those were post-2010 after Prop 26. How did we defend those?
Now I'm going to bring up
Brian.
Okay. Come up here and defend. Okay, you done with me?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you wouldn't mind hanging out in case my colleagues have questions.
I identified myself for the record, but.
Jan Perry, Department of Economic Workforce Development.
Okay.
Brian Stewart, Deputy City Attorney. Obviously, we don't want to get too deep into the weeds related to potentially outstanding litigation, but I will say the enterprise zone discounts that have been described, the 5 years declining over a period of time, that actually preceded the adoption of Prop 26. Right. That's why that wasn't seen as a potential impediment to implementing that. However, when the zones did expire, just on a plain reading of the ordinance, we didn't have zones anymore to use in offering a discount to new customers. So by the language of the ordinance, we were allowed to continue giving the discount to customers that were already on it. So even though it was post January, even though it was into 2014, some of the customers that were already on it were allowed to continue to the end of their discount. That was in the ordinance specified. If the zones ended, they could do that. So that's why we still had some people on it. Maybe there might even be some on it now if they just got on it. I think there probably are a few that are still on it.
But they wind down in short order.
Those would wind down, right.
Our agreements.
Okay. So I think, colleagues, it's important for us to understand the package of incentives that the City of Los Angeles at one time afforded emerging business, certainly in the enterprise zone areas. Again, as I stated at the beginning, the idea here is that we want to figure out how to grow our economy in obviously a legal way, but also in one that leverages the assets the City of Los Angeles has. And so help us understand what it is that you all think conceptually we can do with the Department of Water and Power. Because again, it's my real belief that there is a rate base, ultimately savings, if we leverage all of the unused capacity that we're mandated to generate in a way that would help make for a better economy here locally.
Can I follow up on the answer that Brian just gave?
Sure.
I just didn't quite understand it before you move on to that.
Sure.
You're saying we were okay because we were prior to Prop 26. Does that mean now that we are post Prop 26 that we would have a legal problem if we wanted to come up with something new?
There's not really any case law out on this, although the Redding case was out, then it was depublished by the California Supreme Court that, kind of indicated that electric rates might be subject to Prop 26, that are charged by a local publicly owned utility such as ourselves, like a local government. And so assuming that that's the case, there is a potential that cost of service becomes the nexus upon which we have to charge the rates. And so, you can offer a discount, but you have to keep cost of service in mind. And I think running the numbers, it looked like that discount may have been too generous at this point. And so that's why this other discount has kind of been, that the department has formulated is it's a bit different. It's a different structure, but, I don't know that same discount is supportable at this point.
Depending on what the Supreme Court says with the Reading case, in however many, in a year or whatever they decide that, whatever we were to do here might hinge on that to some extent.
Well, and again, I would assert that we can construct this in a way that takes into account for that, because meanwhile, is it Moreno Valley? Meanwhile, Moreno Valley, is bragging about luring Tesla with the discounted electricity rates, and they've got it on their websites for whoever's interested in looking at that, investigating it. They've got it on their city websites, and they're luring big manufacturing jobs like that away from Los Angeles. And my sense is that if Prop 26 is a factor, then they may not be within the bounds of what is permissible. So that's why I think it's important for us to construct something that maybe we can tune depending on what future case law presents itself. But certainly I believe that there's a way for us to do this within our own capacity. Because if we don't, the Moreno Valleys of the world will continue to lure big business away from the best city in the country. So with that,
Excellent point. As a matter of fact, if you want to continue with the next slide, you're more than welcome to. Well done, sir. Basically where we're at is that we saw what we had in place before as really an important tool in the toolbox to drive economic development, support our local economy. There are industry practices nationwide that we can look at. We think our newly structured program that we have proposed will be a game changer, will help us attract that new business. As has been stated, we're looking at that excess generation capacity we have during certain hours of the day, and what we're looking at is something that's actually citywide as opposed to something that's defined or retained within a specific zone or area. And again, a huge impact in terms of retention and growth of local jobs, which is a focus for us and for the city. So our business promotion program, the overall goal is to attract new businesses, especially those with medium or large usage coming to the City of Los Angeles. There's a number of benefits there in terms of jobs, local tax-based support, opportunities for us in the Department of Water and Power to use our underutilized infrastructure and capacity to recover costs, and really help businesses enter our marketplace to grow here, be successful, and stay within Los Angeles. Those are the overall general benefits that we're looking at. In terms of the structure, we're looking at a marginal cost-based business promotion option. That would be the qualifying new commercial businesses, A2, A3, A4, that could receive those bill discounts. That would be phased out over a 3-year period. The business promotion service rider limited to a total of 80 megawatts of customer load and would be available sometime in October of 2016. You look at the discounts by year there. That first year discount, again, 7.6%, second year, 5%, and third year, 2.5%. So that's just a high level on the discounts themselves. I think what we're looking at is, again, as Brian has mentioned, a cost of service based approach. We've had to do new cost of service studies both for water and for power. And we're looking at this to be something that we can weave into the proposed rate structures and move forward with those new cost of service studies. And that's what we have for you today.
Dr. Bickle.
We think several questions need to be asked as we go into a discussion of an economic development program like this. First is, what does the program want to focus on? Do we want to focus on income? For example, are we trying to improve all jobs at all income levels, or is it going to be just or middle income jobs, lower end jobs? Second is employment. Is it going to be focused on employment? Or third, is it going to be focused on property values and improving districts focused on in certain geographic areas like the old enterprise zones? second question is eligibility and certification of that eligibility. For the programs for PG&E and Edison, who aren't subject to Prop 26, eligibility is certified by the governor's office. We like to do things locally. We could have it, the eligibility recommendation be developed by the Department of Economic and Welfare Development and certified by an independent group within the city, the controller's office, for example. And the third is how to discount. We've included a lot of alternatives in this. We do have the potential Prop 26 challenge, and Prop 26 includes a fairness standard as part of its measures. So we may be able to address part of the cost of service question through that fairness standard. But another way to address it might be to discount a city tax as part of that, and that tax would be the utility users tax for these eligible customers that have been certified as eligible, and reduce that tax. That tax is 12.5% on total bills for these customers. So we have up to a 12.5% number we could discount in this process on a phased basis.
And that's important because if we, let's say we went that route, we're talking about new tax collected. So it's akin to the tax increment financing idea where, but for this investment, we wouldn't be collecting it. So it wouldn't have a negative impact on our treasury if we went that route.
If we go through the proper eligibility process, right. It's all incremental.
Yeah.
And it's a gain, and we should think of it like any other city tax we might be able to discount.
Colleagues, any questions?
But on that, it's also a question which side of the ledger comes off of the city general fund or the ratepayers, right? Because if you do it based on the utilities tax, then it's the general
That's
fund.
the general fund, correct.
That's bearing the burden, and if you find an energy discount, it's coming out of the ratepayer base.
Well, and I don't think it has to be an either-or proposition. I'm glad that you all are sitting down, but there might be an opportunity to do both. You could do some out of the rate base because as we're ramping up to 50% renewable portfolio standard, I am telling you here and now that there will be peak days when the sun is shining so bright that we may have to pay to curtail generation because of these long-term contracts. And if that's the case, the savings that we would realize if we went ahead and consumed more to its fullest capacity as opposed to not turning on the switch at a facility might benefit the rate base. And if it does, then we're free and clear with Prop 26. And now you're really cooking with fire here. You've got some sort of discount with the tier and the utility users tax. It's not going to be as the good old days, Ms. Perry, where we were at 35% discount. But now you're getting a little bit closer to something that is meaningful. So it could be both, and that's the problem. You give me an inch here, I'm going to take the whole yard.
Without being discouraging at all, I would point out that the California ISO has hot days where it's running 40% renewable and nobody's being economically curtailed, and it's all about how you manage the grid.
Right.
So we may not need to economically curtail, but that's no reason not to have a focused, strong, well-defined economic development program.
So I think there's a way to do this. So I don't know if anybody's got any additional questions, but I think this helps us understand theoretically how to construct it, and we all would very much, unless you all have questions, my recommendation.
Yeah,
Mr. O'Farrell, go ahead.
Thank you, Felipe. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have just a suggestion. You mentioned, Mr. Pickle, as far as criteria, one of them based on the old enterprise zones. That seems to me to be a really good position in which to, start from, because that keeps us on pretty solid footing in terms of a justification or the findings to, roll out this incentive program. And I like the idea of the utility users tax as well. I think that our focus should be on employment, hiring, jobs, myself. I think they should be the number one focus. That certainly was the focus when I worked with the enterprise zones that were in the 13th back in the day. One on the far eastern flank of the district, and then the other one in parts of Hollywood that are the most poverty-stricken in the city. And it was all about really just hiring and retention of jobs.
The part of the comment on income and employment was the development programs since the New Deal era have been focused on unemployment. And it may be time to also think about the decline in the middle class and making sure we consider middle class jobs as part of this mix.
Right. Thank you.
Very good. So with that, colleagues, why don't we go ahead and ask the department to come back in consultation with the Economic Workforce Development Department and the ratepayer advocate to provide a formal written response to the motion within 60 days that addresses the questions that we raised here, but certainly the application verification process for businesses applying for the incentive. This process should include information on how the city will independently verify that the applicant businesses are generating new power, and how the city will verify and or count new payroll jobs created under the incentive. Also ask that how the incentive can be used to target the development of business in the most economically disadvantaged communities in the city, not limited to the enterprise model, but how could we target those areas, and recommendations for alternative incentive options such as a reduction in the utility user's tax or a combination thereof. All right, hearing and seeing no objection, that shall be the order. There are no speaker cards on that item. And with that, colleagues, Mr. Preto, is it okay if we adjourn now?
Yes, it is, sir.
Very good. We're adjourned.